Hanukkah is a time of miracles. Hanukkah is a time for giving thanks. Hanukkah is a time for making new commitments to the performance of mitzvahs and the study of Torah, which is the true light of our nation. I would like to share some stories with you on these themes, which I hope you will all find enjoyable and inspirational. During the horrible years of the Holocaust, there were terrible places called concentration camps where many Jews died. In one of these camps, known as Bergen-Belsen, there was a Rav. His name was Rab Shraga Shmuel Schnitzler. Everyone knew him as Rab Shmelka. He was a beloved Hasidic Yid who always gave chizuk. He gave encouragement to people as he kept on telling them, a Yid never gives up. A Jew never gives up. In 1944, during the month of Kislev, he told the other Yidden in his barrack, we are going to light Hanukkah candles. We are going to have a menorah and we'll be able to celebrate Hanukkah, even here in the barracks of Bergen-Belsen. Now, some of the people thought this was just ridiculous. How in the world could that possibly be? But he was determined to get his hands on some oil and a makeshift menorah. Even as Hanukkah was getting closer and closer, he kept on saying, we can never give up. But of course, there was no oil or any way to light a menorah there. While he was imprisoned in the camp, Rab Shmelka was forced by the Nazis to do a job that had him going out to the fields alongside the camp. A few days before the first night of Hanukkah, when he was out in the field, an incredible thing happened. As he walked, his foot tripped on something sticking out of the ground. When he looked at it more carefully, it seemed there was something buried in the earth. So he waited until nobody was looking. He bent down and pushed away the dirt, and he saw the most incredible thing. It was a little package of oil. Now, how could this be? I mean, this was unbelievable. As he looked closer, he saw that there were other things that were buried under that little jar of oil. This is hard to believe, but he actually saw a little package with woolen strands for wicks and 8 tiny cups for the oil. They had all been wrapped and rewrapped and stored away and buried. Now, it was clear to him that obviously some other Yid in Bergen-Belsen had put this makeshift menorah and oil away so that he should have it for Hanukkah. So Rab Shmelka reburied it carefully again in the exact same spot where he found it. And he ran back to the barracks and he started asking, did anybody hide a menorah? Did anybody hide some oil? No one believed him that there could be such a menorah and oil. The whole next day he watched to see if anyone would be going out to retrieve the oil and the menorah, but no one did. When nightfall of the first night of Hanukkah approached, he secretly went back out to the field and dug up the oil and the menorah and brought it into the barracks. When the guards weren't looking, he and the other Yidden stood around it and lit the menorah. You could imagine that many of them were crying. They just couldn't believe a miracle of Hanukkah here in Bergen-Belsen. And for the rest of Hanukkah, they were able to light the menorah. Eventually, in April of 1945, the Germans gave up and the United States was able to come in and free the prisoners held in the concentration camp. People went to various countries, and Rab Shmelka went to Hungary, and there he became known as the Chaba Rav, as he became a leader for other survivors. A while later, he came to America and visited with the great Satmar Rebbe, the great tzaddik Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum. The Satmar Rebbe had also been in Bergen-Belsen, so they began talking about their days and their difficulties that they had in the concentration camp. And as they were talking, the Satmar Rebbe said, on the 21st day of Kislev, I was rescued. I was able to get out. And you know something, he said? I always felt a little bad because I had bribed a guard and he let me prepare a menorah and some oil that I had hidden in a field, and it was never used. When Rab Shmelka heard this, his mouth dropped open. He just could not believe what he just heard. And he said, Rebbe, your menorah and the oil, they were used, and you can't imagine how much chizuk and encouragement you gave to people without even realizing it. Rab Shmelka then told him the whole story. The Satmar Rebbe sat back, smiled warmly, and was so content, for once again Hashem had performed a miracle with oil in the month of Kislev. This beautiful story took place recently in Eretz Yisrael. Some of you may know that there is a wonderful organization in Eretz Yisrael called Shuvu. Shuvu means to return, and the people of Shuvu create schools for the children of many Russian Jews who have come to Eretz Yisrael from the former Soviet Union. There, they never had the chance to learn very much about their Yiddishkeit. However, now with Torah education, they can return to the heritage of their ancestors. Often what happens is that the children learn Torah, they learn about mitzvahs, they come back home, and they inspire their parents and families. This is a story about just such a boy. His name was Ilya. Now, Ilya was a very good student, and he loved learning. And he would come home and he would tell his parents everything that he studied in school. Now, when he learned about the importance of Shabbos, he would go home and he would tell his parents, and would you believe it? They became Shomer Shabbos. And when he learned about kosher food and told his family about it, the family began keeping kashrus as well. And when it came to Hanukkah, Ilya would light the menorah, and he would be the one to say the bracha, because he was the only one in the house who knew how to say the bracha in Lashon Kodesh in Hebrew. One year, a few days before Hanukkah, the principal noticed that Ilya was coming late to school. Not only was he coming late, but he was huffing and puffing as he came into the school, all out of breath. The principal called Ilya into the office and he said, "My child, I've noticed that the last couple of days you've been coming late and you're out of breath. Is everything okay?" Ilya said to his principal, "Rebbe, I hope you won't be upset with me, but I want to explain. You know, this year our Rebbe taught us in class about the importance of lighting Hanukkah candles. But he did say that the best way to do the mitzvah is to use oil, olive oil, because that's what they used in the Beis HaMikdash. Rebbe, I like to do mitzvahs if I can in the best possible way. But my parents, they don't have a job. They're very poor because they really don't speak the language well. So I didn't want to ask them to go out to buy olive oil because it might be expensive. So I stopped taking the bus, and instead I saved the money that my mother gave me to travel to school so that I would be able to buy oil for Hanukkah. And that's why I was late every day, because every day I was running to school, and it takes about 40 minutes to get here. That's why I'm out of breath. But Rebbe, you can be sure that I'm not going to come late tomorrow, because now I have enough oil to last me for the entire Hanukkah." The principal was so proud of Ilya, and he said, "Ilya, of course I'm not going to punish you. You are so special because you want to do the mitzvahs in the best possible way. You are a true light unto the other boys in the school, and I'm going to tell all of them what you did. The whole school will be so proud of you, for you have shown that even a little boy can be a big tzaddik. Have a Chag Sameach, a happy and a joyous Hanukkah." There was once a poor Yid who lived in Eretz Yisrael named Rav Lipa. He was so poor that he had to raise money from many, many different people in order to support his family. So what he did every once in a while was travel to distant lands, and one of the lands that he traveled to was Italy. One Friday morning, he came to the city of Milan, but he didn't know anyone there. He was just walking around, hoping he could find someone who would tell him where the Jewish neighborhood was. As he was walking, a horse-drawn carriage stopped right in front of him. A wealthy man stepped out of the carriage and said to Rabbi, "Shalom Aleichem, what's a Jew like you doing here in Milan?" Rabbi replied, "I'm looking for the Jewish neighborhood. I don't really know anyone here." The wealthy man said, "Well, you're in luck. I'm Jewish, and I'll be happy to take you to the Jewish neighborhood." Rabbi was indeed very fortunate. This man, whose name was Mr. Hilvicht, was so nice to him and invited Rabbi to spend Shabbos with his family. And Rabbi was thrilled. Friday night, after they came home from shul, Rabbi and Mr. Hilvicht came to the beautiful Shabbos table. As they were sitting at the table and singing Zmiris and saying Divrei Torah, Rabbi was looking around the elegant room, and then he noticed the break front. And in that cabinet, he had never in his life seen so much silver and so much gold. His eyes were just wandering from shelf to shelf as he studied each bowl and each goblet. And then suddenly he noticed a strange thing. There was a flask, a jar, that seemed to be broken. It had jagged edges, and it certainly didn't seem pretty, and it certainly didn't look like it was expensive. What in the world was it doing there? Mr. Hilvicht noticed that Rabbi was staring at the broken jar, and so he asked him, "Do you see something unusual in the break front? You seem to be staring at something." Rabbi was surprised that Mr. Hilvicht noticed him staring at the jar, and he said, "Yes, it's that broken jar. It just seems out of place next to the other expensive gold and silver vessels that you have here." Mr. Hilvicht then told Rabbi the following incredible story that explained it all. He began, "I was born in Amsterdam, and I lived there with my parents as a religious boy in our wonderful home. When I was 18 years old, I was asked to come to Italy to help my grandfather with his business, and I did that. And when he passed away, I took over his business, and then it really began to prosper. As I was making more and more money, I was so involved in the business, I was so busy, that sometimes I missed davening. I just felt I just didn't have the time to daven. But slowly but surely, that led to my becoming less observant of mitzvahs. I started falling away from Yiddishkeit. I started falling away from my practice of Judaism. Eventually, I became quite wealthy. I got married, I had children, but I did not any longer live the life of my parents or the life that I lived as a child. One day, I was walking in the street, and I see a whole group of children surrounding one little boy who was crying. I walked over to the little boy, and I heard him cry out, "Oh, what am I going to tell my father? What am I going to tell my father?" I asked the boys, "What's going on? What happened here?" And one of the boys told me that the little boy who was crying came from a very poor family, and his father had saved money all winter to be able to buy oil for the Hanukkah menorah, which was going to be used that night. The boy's father had told him to go out and buy the oil, and that he should come straight home and not play with the other children. And now the crying boy added, "But I didn't listen, and I played with everyone here, and somebody bumped into the jar and it broke, and now I have no oil for Hanukkah. What am I going to tell my father?" Mr. Hilvicht said, "I told the boy to come with me, and I bought him a brand new bottle of oil and gave it to him to give to his father. He thanked me and was able to go home very happy." Later that afternoon, it was almost evening time. I was sitting in my armchair and began thinking, how in the world did this happen that I did not even know that night was going to be the first night of Hanukkah? I was so upset. I went back for a walk to the place where the little boys had gathered a couple of hours earlier, and that broken jar was still there. I took it and brought it back into my house. That night, to the surprise of my wife and children, I lit one candle for the first night of Hanukkah. My wife and children asked, "What is this?" And I began explaining to them about the miracles of Hanukkah as I remembered them from when I was a child. The next night, I lit 2 candles, and the night afterwards 3 candles. And slowly but surely, that was the beginning of my coming back to Yiddishkeit. My wife and children soon realized how important this was to me, and with their understanding, you see today, we live in a very frum, wonderful, happy environment. But it all started because of that broken jar, and that's why I keep it in the break front. It helps remind me that one day we all have to ask ourselves that same question. What am I going to tell my Father? Our Father in heaven, that's Hashem. He loves us and He watches us, and eventually we're going to have to answer for everything that we do and everything that we didn't do. I'm forever grateful to that little boy for that comment, because that is what brought me back to the ways of my father and mother. It brought me back to the ways of my ancestors, and that's why I keep the jar with me. One of the themes that we talk about on Hanukkah is lahodos ulahalel, which means to thank and to give praise. On Hanukkah, we say thank you to Hashem for the nisim, the miracles that happened in the time of Hanukkah. But in reality, we have to say thank you to Hashem for everything that we have in this world. We have to not only thank Hashem, we have to thank our parents, we have to thank our Rabbeim, our Mechanchos, our teachers, our friends, anyone, for the good that they do for us. So let me tell you a very nice little story that happened with me. I was in LaGuardia Airport in New York, about to travel to Toronto. And as I was going through security, I put all my things into numerous bins so that they could put it through the X-ray machine. And after it goes through the screening of the X-ray machine, you can pick up your items on the other side. So after I got my things, I went to the gate and I was waiting until they would announce for everyone to board the plane to Toronto. But suddenly, 2 security officials came over to our area and walked directly over to me. Everyone was looking at me as if I was a suspicious person. One of the officials took out a cell phone and said to me, "Is this your cell phone?" I said quickly, "No, thank you, officer. I have my cell phone. I'm carrying it." And then, just to be sure, I started looking for it. But I couldn't find it. I usually carry it on my belt, but it wasn't there. I checked my shirt pocket, my jacket pocket, my pants pocket. It wasn't in any of those places. And so I looked again at that cell phone, and I recognized it. And I said to the officer, "That is my cell phone. I can't believe it." He said, "Well, when you walked through security, you had so many bins, you were carrying so many things, and you left your cell phone in one of the bins." I picked up the cell phone and said, "Thank you so much." And just as the officer was about to leave, I said to him, "Excuse me, sir, there are 2,000 people here in this terminal. How did you recognize me? How did you find me?" He said, "Do you remember what you said to us as you walked through the security gate?" I said, "No, not really." He said, "You looked at both of us and you said, 'Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I feel safer that you're here.'" He then added, Thousands of people walk by security every day. Nobody says a word of thank you. You said thank you, so we were going to find you if you were the last guy in the terminal. Now I ask you, besides the Kiddush Hashem that was made because those officers saw a Jewish person having gratitude, isn't saying thank you and having Akaras HaTov an important midah, an important character trait that we should all practice, especially during this wonderful time of Hanukkah in the season of Lahodos or Lahalel? Let's remember to thank all who do something positive for us. Let's remember to be people of Lahodos or Lahalel. I once visited the city of Rome in Italy and saw that there was an arch that is more than 50 feet tall. It's called the Arch of Titus, or the Arch of Titus. Titus is the Roman general who was responsible for the conquest of Yerushalayim and for the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. On the outside of the arch, near the top, there is an engraving that shows the very sad, broken people of Klal Yisrael carrying out the menorah which stood in the Beis HaMikdash. They were going out of Yerushalayim. When I saw that arch, I was wondering, why does Hashem allow that arch to be standing for so many years in almost perfect condition? It's there almost the exact way it was built. There are so many other ancient arches, temples, and courthouses in that area of Rome that are in ruins. There are some pillars of buildings standing alone. There are stairs leading to doors with nothing behind those doors. But why is this arch almost perfect? I want to tell you something fascinating. In 1953, the great Ponevizherov, Rabbi Yosef Kahaneman, came to this arch and looked towards the engraving and pointed and cried out, "Titus, Titus, you thought you would get rid of us. You thought you destroyed Yerushalayim and that the Jewish people would be gone forever. Well, look at the world today. We, the Jewish people, are all over. We are studying Torah and doing mitzvahs. But where is the Roman Empire? It's gone. Not a shred of it remains. Titus, we defeated you." And indeed, Shlomo HaMelech writes in Mishlei, "Ki ner mitzvah v'Torah or." Mitzvahs are like candles. Torah is like a flame of light. It is the performance of mitzvahs and the learning of Torah that lights the way for us in the darkness of Gullus. Perhaps that's why it occurred to me, Hashem has allowed that the arch and its engraving should remain the way it was built for more than 1900 years. The journey into Gullus started after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, and it will continue until Mashiach comes. But for us to survive till then, till Mashiach comes, we must carry the menorah and all that it represents. Ki ner mitzvah v'Torah or. May our performance of mitzvahs and the learning of Torah be a light unto the world, and may those mitzvahs and the Torah study that we do bring us to see yet another light, Oiroi Shel Mashiach, the glorious light of Mashiach. May we all see it in our day.